you have an extremely stressful life at this moment, your risk for developing chronic pain is higher. Your risk for developing sleep problems is higher.
Yeah.
So is then really the link between the two, is that really then there, or is it just confounded by this third variable? It's not normal that you always sleep bad.
Yeah.
It's normal that you sometimes have a bad night, or you have maybe a week of stress.
Yeah.
But long-term problems certainly look into help. And the first line should be CBTI, and it shouldn't be medication. What we tried with this paper that we published in Pain, we try to kind of highlight this to the research world and say, hey, we have a problem that we need to get better in really thinking about how we define different sleep problems and how we term them. And this would then hopefully help in the future to reduce research waste.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estáis? El que vais a ver es un episodio especial que grabamos en el Congreso de Afrontamiento Activo del Dolor Crónico el pasado octubre de 2025 en Valladolid. Tuvimos la suerte de acceder a un par de ponentes de nivel internacional y por eso verás que el episodio está grabado en inglés. Para aquellos que lo queráis visualizar, tanto en YouTube como en algunas plataformas de podcast que permiten el acceso en vídeo al contenido, podréis tenerlo subtitulado. Es muy probable que en YouTube también tengas la opción de verlo doblado automáticamente mediante inteligencia artificial. Y lamentablemente para la versión de audio, solo audio, tendrá que ser en inglés. Esperemos que el contenido te resulte interesante. Crearemos también contenidos adicionales subtitulados en español y artículos para el blog para que puedas tener acceso a la información que se comenta sin necesidad de saber inglés. Aprovecho para pedirte tu apoyo al podcast. Siempre es súper útil y súper interesante que nos sigas, que te suscribas a cualquiera de las plataformas en las que consumas este contenido, que comentes y que generes interacción, que lo compartas con tus amigos. La verdad es que nos ayuda mucho. Ponemos mucho esfuerzo en mejorar el podcast, en hacerlo lo mejor posible para todos. Y si nos ayudas, la verdad es que hace una grandísima diferencia. Así que nada, espero que disfrutes del episodio. Allá vamos. So why does poor sleep relate to pain?
Yeah, that's something you read a lot in lots of papers. And I do think that what we know is that lots of people with chronic pain, chronic musculoskeletal pain, they're not sleeping well. So it's something that you come across a lot in the clinic. But yeah, does it really relate as in a causal link? We're not sure yet. And this is kind of big part of what I'm working on to understand a little bit more around, is there a causal link, and then kind of the complexity around this causal link. Because when you look at sleep, or we often talk about sleep and pain, but as pain is, sleep is really, really complicated and really complex from what it contains. So think about, maybe some people have problems falling asleep. It takes them an hour to fall asleep, while other people fall asleep really quickly, but then they can't kind of sleep through the night. They wake up a lot, or they wake up far too early in the morning. And those are different sleep problems. Just as an example to show that just talking about sleep problems, we're not talking about one thing. We're talking about lots of different parameters we need to look at. And I think this is where the research at the moment is just not good enough to actually be specific enough to say, okay, what is there from a causal link? But if you look at many studies, you will find lots of statistical associations. You will, as I said before, you will find that lots of people with chronic musculoskeletal pain, they're not sleeping very well. So this is why it's become maybe a relatively big thing at the moment, or a lot of focus on it around sleep and pain, where there's more research going on in this field to understand maybe what's going on more. But we need to be, as a research community in this context, we need to get better in really grabbing those specifics around sleep problems and sleep disorders also.
And I imagine that is a two-directional problem. I mean, is pain makes you sleep worse, and sleeping bad maybe can increase pain?
Might, yeah. Again, that's what you read in lots of papers. It's really interesting that many papers actually argue also that the direction from sleep to pain might be stronger than the other way around. Well, I'm not sure that the evidence is strong enough for that. It's, again, we're talking about statistical associations. It's always depends on what you adjust for and these things. But we find certainly that when you ask people with acute pain, that they tend to sleep worse when they have, for example, an episode of shoulder pain or back pain. It's quite normal, and everyone can link with that. In chronic pain, so it's maybe a bit more complicated, and there might be lots of subgroups in there where we know from the from the sleep research that also there within the insomnia field there are certain subgroups. It's difficult to find out which ones are there, or there's lots of research going on, but we need to be a lot more specific around those groups, around those parameters that I mentioned earlier, and look at those things more, because the ultimate aim that we actually have is, can we treat sleep or can we treat pain to improve the other?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're looking at, also in a preventive context. But I'm not sure we're there yet. We will probably talk in a little bit about the treatment of sleep for pain. And this is where I feel it's getting more interesting, because when you look at all the observational research, then you will, a lot like the observational research that we have at the moment, you will see, okay, there seems to be this strong link between sleep and pain, and the other way around. When you then look a bit further at the interventional research, you see, actually the associations are not as strong, and you don't find that it works that well for pain if you improve sleep, for example.
Yeah.
So it's again, like, gets me back to the idea of it's far more complex than we might make it, or how we might think about it, as like sleep as one thing and pain as one thing.
Yeah.
There are so many more variables involved that we need to consider.
Volvemos ya mismo con nuestro invitado, pero déjame decirte algo. Si sufres de dolor lumbar crónico, escucha esto porque es seguro que te puede ayudar. Nuestro curso online aborda el dolor lumbar crónico desde todos los ángulos posibles. El estilo de vida, hábitos y conductas, aprendizaje motor, la biomecánica, neurociencia, comunicación y, por supuesto, mucho movimiento. Contiene 20 lecciones teóricas y 17 ejercicios prácticos que te ayudarán a reconciliarte con tu cuerpo. Y esto no es teoría vacía, sino conocimiento aplicable desde el primer día. Y ahora mismo, por tiempo muy limitado, puedes acceder a este curso con un descuento que es muy, muy especial. Pero date prisa, porque esta oferta no va a durar mucho. Solo tienes que buscar el enlace en las notas del podcast y da un paso adelante que te ayuda a entender las claves del dolor lumbar crónico. Y ahora, seguimos con el podcast. Yeah, I imagine that this kind of situation where maybe you're even just stressed or overworked or busy, and you are in this mood or state of mind that you are ruminating, or you are anxious, or you are in a rush all the time, and maybe you go to sleep and you keep with this internal thought processing and dialogue continuously sleep, and that is also a component in persistent pain.
Absolutely.
So maybe it's that even underlying mental, even environmental, like contextual place where we are, that it's influencing both at the same time. So again, it's like everything in pain is so complex, it's so contextual, so many variables that are interacting. So yeah, it's interesting that you discovered that even people describe their sleep issue in more than 300 different ways. That's amazing.
It was actually in research studies that it was defined in lots of different ways, and that's the big thing, that, for example, for just the term insomnia, we found more than 20 different definitions that were used in research. From an insomnia severity index, which is quite the typical measure for clinical insomnia symptoms, to diagnostic criteria for insomnia disorder, to single questions saying, do you have insomnia or not? And I don't think anyone would argue that those are the same populations that you get in the end. So I don't think anyone would say that just asking one question of, do you have insomnia or not, whatever people understand as insomnia, is the same as a full set of diagnostic criteria. And this means that many of the studies within the research that exists now, we can't really combine them very well. So if you would say you want to do a review looking at all the studies, looking at insomnia for chronic musculoskeletal pain or the associations there, if you would just take the term, you will have lots of studies that actually measured a different population, different insomnia population. Similarly, in the pain world, if you just take chronic pain, you might have some studies where they define chronic pain as pain persisting for 3 months, other studies for 1 month, other studies added another criterion to it, saying like, okay, you also need to have some aspect of disability there. So this makes it so difficult to compare the different studies. In the sleep world, or in the sleep pain world now, it's very, very difficult to compare and to really combine and pool the results of all those different studies. And this is what we tried with this paper that we published in Pain. Actually, this year, we try to kind of highlight this to the research world and say, hey, we have a problem that we need to get better in really thinking about how we define different sleep problems and how we term them. And this would then hopefully help in the future to reduce research waste and to increase our ability to pool different studies together and combine them better. So it's really really complex. And just maybe go into the part you mentioned earlier about confounding. That's something that is also a big issue, where you see in many studies that, as you said, if you have a extremely stressful life at this moment, your risk for developing chronic pain is higher. Your risk for developing sleep problems is higher.
Yeah.
So is then really the link between the two, is that really then there, or is it just confounded by this third
Yeah.
variable? And this is something that the research at the moment doesn't really capture nicely, and that's certainly a problem that we need to look into as a research community in this context. And there are certain developments around directed acyclic graphs that makes it a bit more transparent, how people maybe think about confounding, or about like how variables interact. So lots of ways now how we can also in observational research do that. But at the moment, this is why I'm always very cautious talking about any causal links in this context, because we just don't have the evidence
Yeah.
for that.
And even though you cannot make this direct correlation
Hmm.
or causation, per se, um, would you have, or in the scientific community, do you have any kind of hypothesis about the mechanisms, like why could be the reasons in our nervous system that makes both pain affects sleep and vice versa?
Yeah. You mentioned earlier already kind of like some of the psychological factors. So we know things like high levels of depression, high levels of anxiety, they increase the risk for your chronic pain, but also they worsen often chronic pain, and the same for sleep problems or sleep disorders. But they're also a mechanism in between. So if you have, for example, chronic pain, you will most likely have higher levels of depression, which will then also lead to, or your risk is higher for developing sleep problems, and the other way around. So you already see, kind of just taken one variable, how complex these interactions are. And that's similar with, as I said, anxiety, general stress. We're thinking about trauma, but also then in the wider, like mechanistic world. So there's lots of talk around low-grade inflammation. Also, there's the discussion, or there are reviews out there that look at sleep problems and increased low-grade inflammation. It is something where I'm not sure it's 100% clear yet, but also there seem to be some sleep problems that are linked with higher, just systemic levels of inflammation. And also there we see this link to central sensitization and chronic pain. So it's there are lots of those ideas around this, how things can interact and then mechanistically work together. It is certainly complex, and it certainly makes sense to look at this further. It's probably a parallel thing that we need to look at. Okay, what are the most relevant factors in context of sleep parameters, but also then when we have sleep parameters, what could be the mechanisms behind? And
Yeah.
as I said, the low-grade inflammation seems to be like a target mechanism that could be interesting, but also these psychological factors that are very very important in this context. And when you look at insomnia disorder, for example, it is highly linked to things like anxiety, as you said, rumination. People throughout the day,
Yeah.
or in the evening, they start thinking about all the things that are going on, and that leads them to bigger problems, and them having worse subjective sleep. Similarly, you
Yeah.
talk with pain patients, you get the same idea very often.
Yeah, no, it's for me. It's very clear personally. Is the times that I had a rough time to fall asleep. I would say 99% of the times is because I'm overthinking. I can't
Yeah,
stop this internal thought current,
yeah,
continuous current. Um, and I also I had problems for falling asleep in the past,
yeah,
and it was a moment in my life that I was completely overworked
yeah,
and completely focused on the project, and
yeah,
I wasn't unbalanced. I didn't realize at the time, but definitely everything was out of control. And there's another thing that I personally, for me, I don't know if you found this in research, is this sense of, this balance between sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous
yeah,
system, like you need to feel kind of safe. And if you are in sympathetic mode for, I don't know, 14 16 hours a day, and
absolutely.
then you really need to switch into parasympathetic to really rest, it's
Yeah,
like the nervous system say, okay, that's not going to happen. No,
absolutely.
too late.
And I think this is the interesting thing, where part of the treatment, or like the gold standard treatment for insomnia disorder, is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it works actually extremely well for improving subjective sleep in people with insomnia disorder. And a big part is relaxation therapy or like stress management. And you would think that it might just relate to the evening. It might just relate to like the hour before or something like this, but it's actually a lot more. It's about, as you say, if the whole day you're super, super stressed, and then the evening you say, okay, now I need to actually sleep because tomorrow will be busy again, and I need to, and you think about all those
Yeah, that's
things,
the
it
worst.
will not work. So it's like actually looking at the whole day, how you can generally kind of get this hyper arousal within your system, how you can
Yeah.
like overall maybe calm it down, manage it differently, and then in the evening to just kind of continue that. If you just say whole day full on, and then in the evening now I need to relax, I need to, yeah, it will not work, and probably
No.
actually increases pressure. And
Yeah.
that's typically what you see, that people then start to think about, okay, I need to tomorrow. I need to get up. I need to be fit. I need to work again. So I need to sleep my minimum of 7 hours, 8 hours, and that increases pressure again. Where
Yeah.
you feel like, okay, now I need to sleep. If I don't sleep, then I will not be
Yeah.
able to function. And part of the idea there is then to obviously throughout the day manage things a bit differently, but also in the evening to say, okay, maybe the goal is now not to sleep. So because if you try to sleep, you will most likely not be able to do so. But the goal is more to relax, as in
Mm.
like calm down. And
Yeah.
if you imagine you sleep 5 hours, and you were 3 hours before, you actually were just stressed out, and then you have your 5 hours of sleep, or you had 3 hours of I relax, I think
Mm.
about a nice place, a beach somewhere where so adding 3 hours of relaxation plus 5 hours of sleep versus 3 hours of being super stressed out and five
Yeah.
hours of sleep, you will feel different the next day. So
100%.
taking the stress out of I need to sleep now is probably kind of part of the idea around the evening then.
Yeah.
Because yeah, everyone knows it. We want to sleep, we try to sleep, it will not work. By thinking about something else, taking out the pressure, you might be able to fall asleep.
Yeah.
But generally, if people have, it's normal to have episodes where you're stressed, where you're anxious, where you maybe for a couple of days, for a week, you're not sleeping very well. But if that's something that is really a long-term thing that you for yeah, months and months and years, you have those problems. There is this treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it works extremely well. And it's something that is difficult to access very often because not that many people provide it. But it's evidence-based wise amazing. You don't see effect sizes like this in the pain world ever. So I can only ask people to really look into that, talk to someone about this if they have those ongoing sleep problems.
Mm.
Because yeah, it's not normal that you always sleep bad.
Yeah.
It's normal that you sometimes have a bad night or you have maybe a week of stress.
Yeah.
But long-term problems certainly look into help. And the first line should be CBTI, and it shouldn't be medication for the
Yeah.
long-term sleep
Yeah.
problems.
No, what you said is really, really resonate with me because I've been in all phases that you mentioned, and this idea of fighting with yourself
Yeah,
and stressing out about you really need to sleep. And I discovered a couple of things that you said. One, I name it as acceptance
yeah,
or surrender. It's like, okay, this is what it is. So accept that you are not sleeping well today.
yeah,
This absolutely works automatically. And the second is that idea of maybe I won't fall asleep, but being okay with closing my eyes, breathing, knowing that maybe you're gonna have, like you say, maybe 2-3 hours, and then eventually you fall asleep.
yeah.
And those two things that I had to discover lately really, really helped me a lot in those nights that I wouldn't sleep very well. And after a while, I became a person that is very regular, like
Yeah.
fall asleep kind of easily, wake
Yeah.
up at the same time. I also have some routines with sunlight in the
Yeah.
morning and in the. Is there something that you can share with us about the effectiveness of that?
Yeah. So it's generally a big part of also cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is very strict routines. So if some people that just sleep well, I wouldn't say
Yeah,
they need to start a super routine.
I
I think
know.
it's more about when people really have ongoing problems that they need to get into really strict routines. And
Yeah.
it's mainly about the wake up time. So the wake up time, if that is very regular, I don't know, you have your wake up time at 8 o'clock or something like this. That really helps to set your internal clock. There, we're talking about cortisol, we're talking about melatonin. That's part of then the idea around light. And you can help to set this internal clock with certain markers. So Zeitgebers is the word, and that is light, sunlight in the morning. That's an important, or sunlight throughout the day is an important aspect to set your internal clock, your circadian rhythm, but also things like exercise, things like when you eat, all those things that help to set your internal clock, and that's certainly important. Um, this is really the big idea around the rhythmical pattern of when to sleep, what to do around certain times. It's not always possible, and you know that from jet lag. You travel far away, and then your internal clock is just gone. But normally it sets itself quite nicely with especially light. So this is why maybe going flying very very far and then go into your hotel room where it's dark and then sleep in directly, even if it's day in the place you arrive, might not be the best idea.
Yeah.
So there's certainly a big aspect around this, that routines are just a key thing for people to get into, with light, with regular food intake, having breakfast, having lunch, dinner around roughly the same times. Also exercise, if you would exercise extremely late in the evening, extremely intense. So doing a hit training, for example, just before you want to go to bed, that will set your
Yeah.
system as like I'm active now, but you actually want to calm it down over this time. So those are certainly things that make sense. There is this ongoing discussion around also screens. So in the evening, having your phone, your laptop, and there's lots of discussion. Is it blue light? Is it generally just bright light? I'm not sure that's actually settled, but I think it's generally you want to reduce just the how bright your screens are in the evening. So everything should go towards the night, towards kind of calming down and reducing your internal systems hyperdrive. That's really the idea, and this is big part of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is really setting those really really strict routines. So it's really really strict around the wake up time and around the time you're allowed to go to bed. That is dependent on how much you actually sleep in the night, using a sleep diary. And if you don't fall asleep directly within this treatment, you would go out of bed because you want to have this strong link between bed and sleep. But you would, even if you only sleep 1 hour, you would still get up at the same time, because
Yeah.
that's kind of what you set and that's what you
Yeah.
strictly do. But again, I do think that's something that if people sleep already well, I wouldn't say you now need to change everything. I would absolutely say just if you sleep well, fine. But for people that don't sleep well for ongoing weeks and weeks and months, that's something that is very important to get back into routines around setting the time or setting your alarm at the same time. Also on the weekends might be difficult, but to just get back into those routines to be able to tell your system this is how it should work, when it should calm down for sleep, when it should be active, and this is super super important.
Yeah. And how do you deal with this kind of patients or people who this idea of the diary of sleeping and all these strict routines, that they are kind of type A personalities, perfectionistic, and they start to feel like anxiety or guilt about
Yeah.
when they don't perform? Or how would you manage? Because in pain management, it's also
Yeah.
a little bit like that. Sometimes people
Absolutely.
get a little bit over vigilant or obsessed about what is going on, about
Yeah.
their own process. And I'm always curious how to navigate that kind of
Yeah.
uncertainty.
I do think that there is a reason why the treatment is generally done by psychologists. So
Right.
CBTI is not something that is done by physios typically. There's lots of discussion around this, but I do think that those are the questions for specific types of people, for maybe also specific comorbidities like depression and anxiety disorders and stuff, where it's just very, very important that we know our role, maybe as physiotherapists or as pain specialists, and then say, okay, that's actually where psychologists need to get involved. It is certainly, just looking at it generally from my very limited clinical experience in this context of really sleep therapy. I do think that it is a balance, that some people, they might just, when they focus too much on their sleep, they will probably get worse. You see that a lot with smartwatches. When people start to look at what the smartwatch says, how much did I sleep, how good did I sleep, my sleep score, many people actually get worse.
Yeah.
So there's a term that's called autosomnia, that people are so focused on perfect sleep measured by my smartwatch, that they actually start to get more anxious around, and they feel like I'm missing something out. But what we actually know is that those smartwatches are not great in measuring sleep. Many are okay for measuring yes, sleep or no, so being awake or being asleep. But all the things that go beyond, like sleep stages and all those things, they're not very good for it.
Yeah.
But many people focus so much on it and try to improve and try to maximize the sleep score they can have. And this is often like a negative thing. And similarly, it can be with sleep diaries and things like this. So I guess an experienced CBTI therapist would be able to navigate this with a person, would see, okay, for this person, a sleep diary might be something that's causing negative emotions or negative behaviors around this. Maybe we go towards an ACT therapy where it's a lot more around accepting that some nights are not as great and go in this direction. But it is sleep diaries are generally a good part within the treatment. It's an important part within the treatment, but I wouldn't tell people now just generally in physiotherapy practice maybe to, okay, your patients need to start filling sleep diaries.
Yeah.
I don't think physios are trained for that and they really know how to use it. I do think that's really something within specific settings.
Yeah.
But you're certainly in the position to advise people when they come and they're very concerned about maybe what their smartwatch says around their sleep, to advise them around, okay, there might not be the most reliable
Yeah.
things at this moment. I wouldn't freak out about it. And if they're really worried about it, they can always go to a sleep clinic and discuss it with them. And they might do some more objective assessments like polysomnography to really see if there is something wrong, and reassure people then, or maybe they actually find something.
Yeah.
But it's really something there's ongoing discussion around the role of physiotherapists, the role of then obviously psychologists and sleep specialists. And I do feel that the physios are in the role, or pain specialists are in the role of picking up on those things. When it's a minor problem, we can adjust little things around getting people moving more, maybe some little routines, also like bedtime routines, stress management. That's something I think physios are absolutely in the position to do so. But if you have someone that describes very significant issues around their sleep, maybe also ongoing for years, or maybe before even they started with their pain, then that's something that we should not say, oh yeah, I can deal with
Yeah.
that. I listened to a podcast or I saw like somebody talking for an hour about it. That's something that needs training and that needs then psychology
Yeah.
input. That's an important aspect to consider.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, is our role as physical therapists is very similar. I mean,
Yeah.
it's advising about lifestyle changes and then calm them down through education and try to
Absolutely.
create an exposure to movement, to things that are scary.
Absolutely.
And also to create this network of professionals that you can rely on to
Yeah.
help you. And I agree with you. Sometimes you try to give some advice that falls directly into behavior or psychological processes that
Yeah.
maybe, like you said, you feel that you know and you know how to do it, and maybe it could be worse than
Yeah.
than helpful. So yeah, 100%. And how this, like, studying all this, how do you sleep?
um, it always depends. I think you described it nicely. You have periods where everything is more stressful, you're a bit more anxious, you're just feeling like everything is maybe a bit too much, and then your sleep will be impacted. I don't worry too much about it. It's actually an interesting experience for me now, also, where I was thinking a lot of times, okay, I need to sleep around my 8 hours. That's kind of what works for me. I wasn't too focused at I have to absolutely 8 hours, but kind of around this. But I also realized that some nights actually I sleep less, and that works also for me. It's not that I want to do that every night, but it's not something I'm like catastrophizing about it or make it a really big thing that, oh God, I only had 4 hours. So tonight I felt like I only slept like 3-4 hours,
Yeah.
but I'm feeling fine now.
Yeah.
So it's you have light here. It's nice and warm. I talk to people. It also keeps you awake. If I would do that every night, it would be a problem. But for one day, it will absolutely work. So I do think it's also normalizing a bit that sometimes not sleeping well is okay.
Yeah.
And the other way around, even people with insomnia disorder, they will have some good nights from time to time. So the diagnostic criteria, they talk about a minimum of 3 bad nights per week. So if you have 3 bad nights per week, really bad as in like terrible, and but the rest you sleep okay, you would still potentially fulfill the criteria.
To have insomnia.
So to have insomnia disorder, exactly. So
Okay.
this is something where I think we need to normalize a bit on one side that that everyone will sleep badly from time to time, also maybe for a week or 2 weeks when
Yeah.
you have very extremely bad periods or stressful periods. And then in other times when people have a sleep disorder, just because they have from time to time one good night, that doesn't mean that they don't have a sleep problem. So it's those two extremes I think we need to be careful about. But I also feel, for example, when we travel far, that when we come back the first days, jet lag is a real thing. And then I kind of go in my toolbox, and then we use things like light exposure to really get our internal clock back to where we were. And you can make those things easier with relatively simple tools, strict routines, strict aspects around light exposure. So in some cases, also when you know how to use it, melatonin supplementation, all those things can be useful in this context to just get your internal clock back.
Yeah.
So it's for me, it's something where if I have it for longer and then it frustrates me that I'm not sleeping very well, but I kind of know what I can adjust for things. And the short ones that are just, or the short periods, that's more for me playing around maybe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't bother me too much. But when you talk to many people that focus on sleep, many of them will actually have quite a lot of sleep problems. So it's not
Yeah.
an easy fix. But as I said before, this CBTI, so this cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, for people with sleep problems, it just, when you look at the effect size, it works so extremely
So
well.
you have applied all those habits into yourself
At times
at
when I
times.
need it.
Okay.
And I think this is the big thing, that also, as we would do in physiotherapy clinic, you wouldn't say, okay, as a physio, you need to do all the specific exercises all the time. You would maybe, when you have a specific problem, you would start with some exercise and then gradually phase them out and do just normal activities. That's the same here, that you get a toolbox that you can use, and you can apply those things. And over the years, you will have periods, okay, now I need to readjust. And that's the idea of also of CBTI, that people actually get like the self-management skills. That's really, really key of
Yeah.
this treatment.
I lately, well, in the last couple of years, I think we all learn. I think it's very cultural that we all learn that things that we don't like, we need to kill, like painkillers, or
Yeah.
we need to sleep and we
Yeah.
need to take a sleep pill. The way I think it's working for me, it's every time I have pain, musculoskeletal pain, or I feel myself like ruminating, a lot of internal self-talking, or I have problem to sleep. Now I have like the opportunity to say, okay, there is something that is not balanced in your life.
Yeah.
That is something maybe you don't know yet, but your body is telling you that this is not the right direction. So I kind of appreciate those symptoms in a way. Like, okay, now I need to be, like you said, like very strict with my routine, especially with this bad mood,
Yeah.
like waking up at the same time, going into the sunlight, being more strict with.
Yeah.
If I don't feel like eating, make sure that you eat and you eat healthy.
Yeah.
Make sure that you don't skip your exercise routines. And I think that kind of organize itself. And I think it's a very powerful message as that I think we can do as physical therapists, is like your body's giving you signals, and instead of trying to shut them down, embrace them as information that your body is telling you to help you to make some changes. But because at the end of the day, it looks like most of what happens to us is kind of lifestyle decisions or behaviors that we have. And we get very used to, very addicted, it's very comfy, the things that we do. But at the end of the day, in the long term, is not very adaptive for us. It's not helpful, right?
I do think that there are some complexities to it, because if you're in the position to adapt your lifestyle and you say, okay, I just get back to my routines, like I start exercising more, I maybe go to bed a little bit earlier, or do some perfect, then it's a nice thing. You're back in control. You kind of a reminder for you to get back there. The problem is often that the people we see in chronic pain or with sleep problems, they don't. It's not that easy to kind of switch their daily life. Maybe they have kids that keep them very busy. Maybe they have comorbidities which would make it very, very difficult for them to adapt those things. Maybe job-wise, it's just they have to work in a job they really don't like, that really gives them a lot of stress, and they just can't change it because the situation from a financial point of view. So I think this is often where in physically or in physiotherapy practice, where we can't adapt all those things. So we need to kind of work with what's possible. And it might be frustrating because you feel like, I could now, if it was me with this back pain, I could adapt those things. But I think in some situations, it's just necessary to use for things like medication, or just some passive helps to just get the people back into, okay, I can function, and then they might be able to start doing other things from a mental health point of view, from a pain point of view, where you think about people with acute back episodes where they just can't do anything. We tell them you need to stay as active as possible, but they literally can't get up from bed. You wouldn't say, okay, that's a nice reminder to get more active again. You would say, no, take your medication for the next couple of days. if you can move, get up, move as much as you can. But if it's just not possible, then it is not possible, and then we need to give you medication to allow you to do those things.
Yeah.
So I do think in wherever it's possible to change those things, absolutely, that should be first line. And when people are willing to do so, but then we have those nice toolbox around sleep medication for short periods, pain medication for short periods, also mental health supports from a medication point of view that can be useful, can be very useful in certain contexts.
Yeah.
If that's becoming the only support that people get and the only coping mechanism they have, then it's a problem. So and this is, I think, what makes it so complicated. Maybe working actually with humans and also working in pain practice. It also makes it probably interesting, as in it's not that easy that you have a person that has all the opportunities to change everything, and you just kind of adapt a little bit here and there, and they're fine.
Yeah.
So this is where we need to probably embrace the individuality of people and the complexity, and also appreciate that people have different contexts and different backgrounds where we just have to work with
Yeah.
in the context of sleep, in the context of pain, in the context of whatever comes across.
Yeah, I think if it's a process, because if you ask me like 10 years ago to do some of the changes that I made, that now I can see the benefits in myself.
Yep.
It's a process. I mean, I would tell you I cannot do that.
Yep.
But when you start to realize that you have more agency than you think, and maybe you need to take tough decisions, job wise, comfort wise. So things started to be more salient. It's like, okay, now maybe I have the opportunity. But you're right that there's some people very bad, like social situations, economical situations that and I agree with you. And I want to emphasize this thing that you said is, now it looks like some people, they like refuse medication. Like, I'm not gonna take this even though I'm suffering. This is bullshit.
Yep.
I think it helps as crutches from, like you said, from a short period of time, and then understanding that that is not the solution, that you're not healing anything, but it gives you the window of opportunity to do something. But at the end of the day, I think it relies in your ability to solve your problems and to make these changes and to observe yourself. And it's interesting always this balance between, what can I do? How can I modify? When that is going to happen? This society of very kind of everything has to be fast, to happen just right away. I want my food right away. I want my entertainment right away.
Absolutely.
I see it with my kids. It's like they don't know how to wait. They don't know how to be bored.
Yeah.
So these dynamics are so interesting to navigate, and I'm sure that is also affecting sleep. This kind
Absolutely. And ask me about manual therapy 10 years ago, and I would have said, oh, absolutely, I don't do manual therapy. Horrible, nobody should ever do it. Ask me about it now, where I see it's just a tool that can be very nice for some people in certain situations to use. If you explain this is fixing you, that's a problem. If you explain that it's a tool that might help to maybe guide your education, we moved a certain area and now you feel it's better, cool, we can also do that at home.
100%.
So things like this, it can be super, super powerful. So all those things in my toolbox that can be useful for certain contexts, I would absolutely use them.
Yeah.
And I would never be as strict as, okay, you should never do that or you should never do that. So it's the same with medication, but it always, absolutely, as you said before, it needs to go towards agency for the people. It needs to towards shared decision making. People need to be in the position to also be allowed to choose. Also be allowed to choose. I don't feel like I can now start to exercise. It's not working. Everything is just an overdrive. But as physiotherapist, you want people to exercise because the evidence says back pain, you need to exercise and things like this. Absolutely, but it might just not be the moment for people to start that. And you shouldn't hide it. You shouldn't say, okay, when we now do just 10 sessions of manual therapy, that will work perfectly for you. But you might also need to accept that people have the agency and the individuality and the choice to make those decisions, as hard as it might sometimes be. And it's something that kind of like the more I think about it, maybe the older I get, I do feel that this is something that's often missing also in pain practice, that we just make certain decisions for people without considering what they actually want, what that
Yeah.
actually works for them, and what their background is, from where they're coming from. And if somebody already works 15 hours in an incredibly physical job, they might need some specific exercises, but they
Mm.
might just not be able to do them.
Yeah.
And we might just need to first calm them down, give them a bit of relief in whatever way that is, and then we can maybe see, okay, how can we adapt things for this person if this person is in the position to do so.
Yeah.
But if we directly kind of close the door and we start with, but you need to do the exercise, if you don't do it, nothing will ever get better, then they will probably not come back. We haven't helped this person, they go somewhere else where somebody is maybe just doing some passive things, and so we don't win anything.
Yeah.
So this is really where I feel the complexity of the human. It's difficult. It makes everything difficult, but we need to appreciate it, and that's where maybe physiotherapists then over the years, when we get a bit more experienced, we might see that more as in, okay, how can I adapt my approach to the person?
I
I
love
would I
that.
would hope that's happening.
Love that. Very well said. Um, and it's interesting because you guys that have been like very kind of into the research, like doing the research, sometimes you are more flexible and adaptable that maybe physical therapists that just consume the research, the research, and
Yeah,
they are very rigid in this idea of evidence-based practice.
yeah,
and and again, if you become too rigid and you're trying to make everyone fit into this study that you read, it's
yeah,
going to be impossible, even though so sometimes I think this is happening, and some people are really trying to make their patients fit into, and also this idea of phenotyping and stuff, and and I usually have this idea of one n equals one study. Like, okay, I have
yeah,
my patient, and I really need to study all the variables there, and I
yeah,
really need to dig very deep into that, and of course using ideas that you can take for science, but maybe it doesn't work for that person. So I love it that, like you said, okay, maybe this person needs exercise, but definitely it's not the time, or it's not what they want. I cannot create that
yeah,
synergy, that relationship with them, and he's not gonna trust me, and I cannot help if that doesn't
yeah,
happen. So I think that message is also important, because we I don't know how it's in Spain. We went from, okay, all pseudoscience, physical therapy, whatever somebody tells you to do
yeah,
it as and applying techniques. Then we jump into the wagon of evidence based. We
yeah,
became like very rigid into it. And I think now it's time to get something in between, like
yeah,
creating some sort of intuition, artistry into the work, and be very aware, very present, but also what science is doing is
yeah,
saying, it's it makes sense or not.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think when you look at kind of like the early idea of evidence-based practice, it was never just about the evidence from studies. It was
Yeah.
always about taking into account what you as a therapist believe in, what your background is, what you're good at, but also the patient side, what they want, where they come from, and then the studies, and try to bring it all together. But you're absolutely right. It's often kind of getting very rigid around, I'm an evidence-based physiotherapist, so I only do I don't know, exercise. I only do this and this. And it was certainly me 10 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, still absolutely like this. But it just doesn't work. And I had certainly lots of people that probably really didn't like me because I was so strict and rigid in the way. And I said, no, we don't do any massage or manual therapy. I don't like that. There's no evidence for it. We should do something else. The nice thing for me now is I actually don't see patients. So I'm a full-time researcher, and that makes it nice for me to look at those things and kind of give people advice and say, oh, the studies say, because I don't have to make those decisions. I don't have
Yeah.
to see people and really like see the complexity.
Hmm.
It's easy to sit here and say all those things, but I certainly would advise against just taking especially one study and say,
Yeah.
this study says this is what we have to do and this is why we do it. Because when you also look at, so within systematic reviews, for example, you have something that's certainty of evidence. That's often that people kind of rush over it, but it's the idea of how certain are we that the results of our pooled analysis. So if we have, let's say, 10 studies, when we put them together, that this actually is close to truth, or it might change when we have more studies. And when you look at the physiotherapy field, the large majority of reviews will actually show very low certainty in whatever we do.
Yeah.
Is it exercise? Is it manual therapy? So if we have more really good studies, that might actually change. So by saying I'm evidence-based, this is why I only do the one thing, you really need to be very, very, very sure that actually what we do is the only thing that works for those people. So I would be trying to kind of introduce the evidence. I don't say don't use studies, don't look at studies, but you need to be informed by it. You need to take it as this is what we know at this moment. This is what we consider at the moment, what the guidelines say, what the studies say, and we try to work this into the therapy as maybe the main part. But you also need to be flexible and use other things around to get people to do what the evidence says. And ideally, you see that maybe from cancer research, that you have then the evidence of for 3 different type of treatments. You have pros and cons. You have one is maybe more effective but has more side effects. Other has less side effects, slightly less effective. So this would be the ideal, that we could tell people, okay, we have 3 options that all are evidence-based in different ways. You can choose, but we're not there at the moment in physiotherapy. So I do think that there is generally quite good evidence for movement and exercise for most things. Not overwhelming as in we have extremely large effect sizes, but it's generally a positive thing. It gives agency to people when we do it right. But I wouldn't be dismissing all the other things or say that the evidence for one is so much stronger than for all the other things. So it's and this is where we need to evolve towards doing better studies that are from a design better, a larger sample size to really get good effects. And maybe also more some pragmatic studies where it actually uses a framework where we can adapt things to people. When you look at the RESOLVE trial from Australia with cognitive functional therapy from Peter O'Sullivan and team, they actually had a relatively very fluid framework how they can use CFT, and they trained people in this way, and then they adapted it, and it showed actually quite incredible effect sizes. Where you think that probably is the way where we maybe not phenotype people into 2-3 groups, but rather need to look at the individual and how a certain complex framework or complex system actually works for people then. So it's as I said, it's nice for me to sit here and like talk about all those things, but in clinical practice it would always be complicated, and we need to evolve and adapt and not be rigid. If we're rigid, then we will lose lots of the individuality, and we can't give people the choice that they actually should have.
Yeah. It's nice that you're at that point, because I imagine that if I'm all the time doing research and not seeing patients, I could be very misguided about what I see. And when you are in front of a human being that is a complex system, you realize that it's not as easy as in the papers.
Absolutely.
I think that for chronic conditions or long-term conditions, and even could be like a sleep disorder, like you're not sleeping very well, this idea of being able to change your behaviors and to activate into doing some stuff that, and I realize it's not just about the thing that really is going to help you, it's about starting. It's about start in motion, like to do something, even though this is not the step that is going to really help you, but at least you are giving some steps into that direction. So it's that activation, that change in the behavior that I think that this kind of therapist brings into the table, and is this merge into psychology and physical therapy that I think makes complete sense, because at the end you can have like a behavior is organic. We separate mental from physical, but it's not a separation. It's all the both sides of the same coin. So I think it makes a lot of sense that for us as physical therapists start to look at, okay, how can we create this rapport, this relationship with the person in front of us, in order to start them or to help them to start doing some whatever it is. It's just a tiny step. It's just to wake up in the morning and just walk 10 minutes. Having some sunlight in your eyes is very easy to do. You can do it, you can create a habit, and from there you can build it up. It makes a lot of sense.
And getting them in control. And that's, I think this is the big thing. And control, you might control symptoms, that's one thing, but you actually want the person to be in control of recovery of their own rehabilitation. And that's why I feel we need to be smart when we use passive strategies like medication, manual therapy, that we use it to get people back in control. If you use it this way to say, we do manual therapy to allow you to do other things that fantastic. If you say we do manual therapy and then you go home and you just keep doing the same thing, you come back a week later, we do the same thing again, but it doesn't give them control over their own situation.
Yeah,
That's not the idea. And I think this is
100%.
absolutely, I'm 100% with you that this should be our role.
Yeah.
And our role, what often unfortunately happens is that we maybe take control away from people, as in, I'm the therapist, I know what you should do,
Yeah.
versus, okay, let's see that we, in the beginning, we discuss about things, we make shared decisions, and the more it kind of develops that the patient or the person actually then is really in control of, okay, this works for me, perfect, let's go from there, let's get you there. And ideally those are then obviously active strategies, thinking about certain habits that are positive, movement, sleep, all those things. So this should be key. This should be
Yeah.
generally our idea to get people towards that. With any problem, it's not just pain. It's also when we think about neurological disorders, just giving people some control over their life, over their own situation, just makes a whole lot of difference.
Yeah.
If people are out of control and everyone takes everything away, that's a difficult it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it then difficult for people to actually cope with situations, because it's just
No, I think that part is super important. I think that we have a huge role over there, and also, like you said, in the cognitive world, is also reduce the iatrogenic messages, the the negatives or sinister beliefs that they hold. Trying to calm them down, and even this idea of acceptance. Okay, maybe you're in the best time of your life. Maybe it's time to cleanse your teeth, and this is gonna be okay, or we figure it out, or it will be better. And I think we also have a huge opportunity, because we are seeing people one-to-one. We have time to interact with them, and if we build that relationship, we have these tools through education, through movement, through manual therapy. I agree with you that we can create that connection with a person that is very kind of intimate. And it's I think it's beautiful. I love the interaction with patients. I don't know if you miss it, but
at times.
For me, what I did is to do it in my own terms, like trying to be very few patients a week, and that works amazing. And actually, it's kind of a little bit therapeutic for me, like working and focusing in the person in front of you. Absolutely reduce your focus in yourself. That is sometimes is really nice. Yeah,
I think this is the balance for me, where I absolutely follow that if you have enough time and you have the context to really work with people, with the person in front of you, to take the time to understand their situation, to build this relationship, amazing. Physiotherapy, like, I'm not sure there's a better job, because you can be really creating this very personal relationships with people and help them over time. I worked for 2.5 years in England in a pain clinic, and it was also during COVID. And around this time, it was everything via the phone, and it was just extremely distressed people, constantly being in bad situations, and the system, or like the whole context, didn't allow to really create this relationship. You're talking with people via phone. You don't have much time. You can't see them regularly, so it was very, very difficult in this context. And people were often also not in a position. They couldn't leave the house because they had lots of comorbidities. And so it was this kind of where I felt that for me it was a negative spiral then with the people, because there was no way to put them really into control, and myself.
Yeah.
But it's very different if you have then the context of, I see people maybe for an hour first appointment, we really connect, we take the time to go through the story, we take little steps, we see each other again in a week for half an hour to, and that's where I think absolutely this is how physiotherapy needs to look like, and this is how it works best, when we can actually kind of use the context of us and the therapy to move somewhere, versus, okay, we have in Germany, it's often 20 minutes appointments. You see people very quickly, you see them again like 2 days later, but it's just so pressed in a time point of view that it's difficult to create this relationship. So also that it's obviously easy then to look at the evidence and say, we this and this works, but making it work in your own context is then another challenge. And
That's
again,
it.
if we're rigid and we say, no, it needs to be this one, it will not work,
You nail
because
it.
it's a different context, it's different people. So this is again where we should be informed by the evidence, but we should also really use our humility to work with people and create those relationships to then use the evidence to obviously guide the treatment in the best way possible.
Yeah. How do you see the evolution of physical therapy, both in research and also in application? Do you have any ideas of where things are going to be, or?
So I mean, as a physical therapist at the moment, it looks like kind of all doors open in all directions. So there's now the idea of lifestyle interventions like sleep therapy, where there are trials looking at can physiotherapies, including from us, can physiotherapists actually use CBTI to train or to improve sleep in people with chronic musculoskeletal pain and sleep disorders. So that's one thing. And there are lots more things coming around stress management, around those things. So I think there are lots of kind of floodgates open at the moment that physios can do everything. And this is a nice development because, as you said, we have more time, but we need to make sure that we do it right. So we shouldn't kind of become noob psychologists. We don't need that.
Yeah.
When people have significant issues from this side, then we need to leave that to the experts. But obviously, we can screen for things. We can see certain aspects of that ourselves. So it's really finding our role at the moment. That's probably what physiotherapy needs to do. And the research world, you never had more research happening than now.
No.
So you see studies popping up everywhere on everything. It's a nice thing that more people also get experience in research, but I don't feel that the overall quality of the research is getting better. And I guess this is a big problem. And I understand as PhD researchers, we need to publish. There's lots of pressure. You need to just get things out, and that's certainly part of the problem. But we need to think longer about which trials we actually need, how we set them up to really get the best results. To also think about how we can translate them to the clinic. So I think this is where we need to evolve, and it seems like there are groups around the world where this actually happens. So I talked about Australia, but also in UK there are like large trials on shoulder pain, for example, which are happening. So it's happening in certain fields, but we generally, as an overall field, need to probably move towards, let's think longer about what we actually need, what is actually relevant for physiotherapy for pain, and move towards then better quality, which is a difficult move, but it's necessary to have better evidence in the end to say, okay, this is actually what works and what doesn't.
Thank you very much, Nils. I think it's very useful, both for physios and also for people in general. I think this idea of linking sleep and pain and researching, I think is absolutely necessary. So thank you very much for doing that. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed the talk, and enjoy always talking about research, but also then the clinical practice. Those are the moments when I start missing it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nils. Bye-bye.